Hello everyone, welcome to my home here in Stockholm, Sweden. I am Nurgleprobe and this is episode 10, another top 5 list, and it's top 5 games for beginners. Let's get this started. Alright, so just as with my last top 5, I want to start off by explaining how this list is decided on, or how I picked these games. And first of all, these are games that you can pull out for new players when you're inviting them to your home. Most of these games can also be played with a group of players that are completely new, all of them, so this is also a shopping list basically. If you're new to board gaming and if you want to start playing with your friends, this is a list that you could use. My number 5 and my number 1 though on this list, I would not use those games, and I will explain when I get there to why. Other than that, I think we are ready to get started.
Number 5.
Alright, so my number 5 is Betrayal at the House on the Hill. This game is based on every horror movie that you have ever seen. You and the other players each have a character walking into this house, revealing rooms. It's a tile flipping game. You place tiles to reveal different rooms and different areas in the house. And there are 3 floors, which is kind of interesting for a house-laying, tile-laying game overall. And these rooms will then give you items or events or omens. And these omens can trigger something that's called the haunt. And that's basically the first half of the game. You walk around, you find things, you level up. Well, you don't level up, but you try to make your stats stronger, and you find items to use later on when the haunt begins. And when the haunt begins, it basically means that one player, probably, it's a bit different depending on the scenario, will become the betrayer. And this triggers by, depending on which omen card you draw and in which room, which actually gives you up to, I think it's over 50 different scenarios for the actual haunt. And new players love that theme, and they love the walking around, placing rooms, there's different events, and they enjoy that usually. I've never seen a new player not enjoying that fact that you're walking around in a haunted house or a flying house. Really depends on the scenario, as I just said. These scenarios then tells you who the betrayer is. You give a book to that player, and that player reads from this book secretly for themselves to see what their new betrayer objective is. And the rest of the players, actually this player should leave the room at this point, depending on the scenario, and the rest of the players will read from a survival book that will tell them their story, what they have to do to win, and what's going on. Some stories even have like very cryptic things and just tell you, you need to find a room. And then the betrayer player actually needs to come into the room and tell you, oh, you hear a sound from this area of the house, and so on and so on. It's really interesting, but that is also the biggest problem with the game, because the first half of the game is great. The theme is great for new players, they usually like it, but as soon as the haunt begins and you need to give this book to one player, that can be a bit too complicated for some. They will not understand all the rules that are given to them, and there can be a lot of text in that book. And if they do not understand everything that's told in that scenario that they're given or their new mission, that can kind of ruin the game from that point if they don't know or understand everything. Usually I tend to help those players. If they have issues with it, it's better to help them, try to tell them what to do, and then I just, do not try to win as hard when I get back to my group. Or if I am the betrayer, because I love being the betrayer, I think I've been the betrayer once. Lately, though, we've triggered a lot of scenarios where there is no betrayer, which is kind of sad, because that's kind of the fun part of the game. Anyway, new players love the theme, and this is one of those games that people will remember, and that's why I think it's so important to play it with new players, because you want to introduce them to a board game that they can remember. Monopoly is a simple game that everyone played, and some people actually enjoy that game. I know, it's surprising. And when you introduce Betrayal at the House on the Hill to them, they will be like, wow, that theme was great. Can we play it again and see what kind of scenario we get? Oh, it's fun flipping those tiles. They're just not used to the mechanics. And that is why I think that it's my number 5, at least, a very, very good introduction game to make them interested in what board games are and what they can give. Yeah, my number 5, Betrayal at the House on the Hill.
Number 4.
Alright, my number 4 is Taiko, also known as the Cute Panda game. This is also a tile-laying game where you are building a bamboo garden. Actually, it's the Emperor's bamboo garden. And you try and place tiles in 3 different colors. They're pink, green, and yellow. And the way you score in this game is either by placing these tiles in a certain pattern, or making the bamboo grow on a special tile into a certain height, or move around a very, very cute panda on the board and eat bamboo. And you can all do all these three things, but you need to collect point cards to see what you need to do to get the points. The game is fairly simple, and the reason I like this as an introduction game is because it's so darn cute. Everyone loves the panda, and the board is colorful, and everything is very sweet. It's not that complicated. I know for a fact, though, that this can be weird for some players if they're used to, I'm sorry to use this example, but Monopoly, where you don't actually have a lot of strategy and things to do. You roll a dice and you move and you buy, or you sell, or you pay. In this game, where there's 3 different ways of scoring, some people will get kind of confused on what they need to do. Because you can take 5 or is it 6 different actions in this game. You also have a die that you roll in the beginning of your turn to see what kind of bonus action you get. And some players will have issues with how they should think and how they should strategize around these point cards and how they should actually build and what they need to do and so on and so on. But they tend to learn it fairly fast, even though it can be complicated for them. And the sad thing about this card is that there's hidden information with the point cards, so you can't really help them in what they need to do. You can explain, in the beginning of the game, you should really explain how the point cards work and what it's needed on the different cards. And from there on, it should be pretty easy on how you play this game. So Taiko, a very, very cute game, also known as the Panda game, and that's my number 4, Taiko.
Number 3.
Right, so my number 3 is another tile-laying game, which is called Carcassonne. This is a great and very, very simple game. There are a few rules in there that are a bit weird, even for, well, not seasoned players. They know exactly how that works, but Carcassonne is basically a game where you take tiles, square tiles, and you build a huge map together with other players. In this map, you place workers, so it's also a worker placement game, and on different roads and cities and on fields to try and score, on monasteries actually, and you try to score points by finishing off those things. If you finish a road, you get points for it, for each tile used and so on, and the one with most workers on something will get the points for it. You can never place a second worker on something that you're already building on, though, unless you're connecting it with something else that you're building. Might sound weird. It's very simple when you play it, though. And the reason I like this as an introduction game for new players is because there's no hidden information in Carcassonne. As soon as a player draws a tile and they look at it, you could actually help them for the first few turns to teach them what to do and how to think. You should never tell them what to do exactly. You should give them options. Tell them you can place it here, place a worker there to get this amount of points later on, you can place it here to do that, and so on and so on. Give them options so that they can think themselves on what they should do. And that is something that's very important. You should never place the tiles for them. Even though some beginners will ask for that. They will tell you, can you please tell me where to just put this for the most points? But it's often better if they get to do it themselves by different options so that they learn. And that is why it's a great beginner game, at least I think so, because it's so simple to learn, so simple to play, and you can help the beginners that have issues with how the game works. The problem I have with this game as a beginner game, it's actually not a problem. It's one of the facts that it's not often asked for. Even though this game is great mechanically and is a really, really fun game, if you have played Carcassonne and Betrayal at the House on the Hill, for example, now, because they're both on the list, with a new player, and they come back, another week or later on to play board games again, there's a bigger chance that they will ask for Betrayal at the House on the Hill for the theming that they actually remember. Or Taiko for the cute panda, but Carcassonne will not be asked for because they like the gameplay, but they don't feel the theme. They don't understand, what's the greatness about the game. People that are new to board games usually tend to like theme more than anything else. But yeah, Carcassonne is still a great game to pull out, and I think most people that play board games or hadn't played board games before, Carcassonne is a great starter. So my number 3, Carcassonne.
Number 2.
Alright, so at my number 2 slot, we have Ticket to Ride, which is a set collection game where you build trains, basically. It's actually about traveling with trains, but you're building trains on a big map. And the way you score in this game, you take point cards or score cards, whatever they're called in this game, I don't actually remember, victory point cards. And you get 2 locations. And in between those locations, you need to build a train track. Basically, it's not actually a train track, but you build trains in between them, and so on and so on. It's easier to explain by just saying that you're building train tracks to new players. And when you've done this, you get the points at the end of the game. Or if it's, I think it's at the end of the game that you actually score it. Yeah, I believe so, because you don't have that information. I'm not sure, though. It was so long since I played Ticket to Ride, actually, so that's kind of a shame. It's a great game. Ticket to Ride is one of the games, if we compare it to Carcassonne, where all the information is open, Ticket to Ride is a better game because there's also hidden information and all the players can strategize on their own, which I think is a very, very strong thing with this game, because it's easy. It's very, very easy. It's easier than Takonoko in that sense, because Takonoko gives you 3 ways to score. Ticket to Ride is basically 1 way of scoring. And the game mechanics, there are not a lot of things to do. You draw cards, you place trains, and that's basically it, or you get point cards. This also have the same issues as Carcassonne, though. It will not be asked for that much because the theme is not that exciting. You build, it's trains. Some people love trains, and they might ask for it again. But most people would probably still ask for the haunted house over the train building game. Overall, though, it's a very simple game, and it's one of those games that you can pull out for any kind of group of players, even the ones that have never played board games before, or, are kind of interested to see what board games are like. Ticket to Ride is one of those simple introduction games where they get to fight for their own points and winnings, which is sweet. So my number... Ow, I bit my tongue. Awesome. My number 2, Ticket to Ride.
Number 1.
Alright everyone, it's time for my number 1, my creme a la creme. My highest rated board game actually on Board Game Geek currently. You can find me on Nurgle there, by the way, under the name Nurgle. And that is The Resistance. This is a great, great party game, especially for board gamers. We love this so much. I love this game so much. It is, as I just said, my highest rated game on Board Game Geek. And I've pulled it out so many times, and every time I pulled it out, everyone loves it. It's basically a game about hidden roles and trying to play success cards and fail cards and different missions. And it's the best out of 5 rounds, and the team just don't know which are on their team and so on. Actually, the red players will know. They are the fewer players, and they are the ones that need to play fail cards. They will know each other, but the blue players won't, and so on. So you need to try and discuss throughout the game who is the player, who's in my team, and try to figure that out. So this might not sound as a beginner-friendly game. The rules are, you have to explain them a lot, you have to go through the game, and it's one of those games, when you explain the rules, people will look confused. They will be like, what am I supposed to do? What am I voting for? Who am I? But as soon as you start playing it, it kind of, it's like a little light bulb appears over their head and they're like, I get it now. And that is the beauty of this game. And what I like about it is that it's a talkative game. It doesn't feel like you're playing a board game, but you are actually playing a board game, or a card game, I guess you could also call it, where everyone needs to discuss and you need to point fingers and you're like, you're probably a red player because your mission failed, and it's very, very exciting to see the group dynamics and to see how different players play this game. Given though this game is not for everyone, of course not. Some people do not like this kind of over social gaming, and that is okay. That is definitely okay. And even though I've played with players that don't talk much during the game, they will then later on be like, could we play the Resistance game with the red and the blue players? It was kind of fun. So even if you're in the game and you're not one of those players that like to talk a lot, you will still enjoy the theatrics of it, the talks and the, pointing of fingers, as I just said, and everything is just so fun about it. And this is one of the games, compared to my other games like Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne, and Takonoko, those games are not always asked for, but The Resistance is constantly a game that people are like, I like that game, let's pull that out. And I think that is one of the strengths. It's so easy to play, and it's very social, and that gives new gamers, because there's, this kind of thoughts around board gaming with new players that they're like, oh, it's so boring and it's kind of childish and everything, but The Resistance doesn't feel like that. The Resistance feels very different from many board games, and it is a party game. Because it's a lot of talking, it covers big groups, so that's usually what you would consider a party game, even though it's still very strategic for a party game. And yeah, you need at least 5 players with this game, which is not a problem. Just invite more players or more beginners and invite them to this game. And if this doesn't trigger off their willingness to try other board games, I don't know what will, actually. This is one of the games that are great to introduce to people to make them feel like, okay, I like the Resistance, and that's a board game, and that's kind of a nerdy board game. It's one, it's not Monopoly, and it's not Risk or anything like that. Let's try something else. And then you can introduce more advanced games after that and move on to maybe the other games that I've mentioned, like Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne, and Taiko, because these are more, I would say, board games. And but the Resistance doesn't feel like that. So yeah, man, I just love this game so much. And if you don't have this game, if you've not played it, you should definitely give it a try. There is also another game now that's coming out. I did not put it on the list because it's not actually out here in Europe. I don't think it's out in the States either yet, and that is Spyfall. And Spyfall might have taken the second slot under the Resistance, or even next to the Resistance. And that is also about hidden roles, and one player is a spy and he doesn't know where he is, and you need to ask questions about the location. And it's also a very interesting game, but that's for another list. Anyway, my number one game to play with new beginners or new players is the Resistance. Alright everyone, thanks for listening to this top 5 list. It's been a pleasure to share it with you. I hope you enjoyed. I am Nurgleprobe. You can find me on Board Game Geek under Nurgle. You can find me on Instagram, where I actually upload a board game sketch once every week, and I'm under the tag Nurgleprobe there as well. You can also find me on YouTube under Nurgleprobe, on Twitch as Nurgleprobe, and yeah, on this podcast or on SoundCloud here, I upload one new podcast every Thursday. I try to do that anyway. There might be some delay sometimes, so it's uploaded on Fridays or under the weekend, but mostly I try to post them every Thursday. So come back next week for another episode of Nurgleprobe. What do I call this? Board Games with Nurgleprobe. And we can have a blast together. I hope you have a great week and a great day, and I will talk to you next week. Take care, and bye-bye. Yes, I have to wait before I record my third game because my dog is moving around and trying to make his bed. And I don't want that to disturb the recording. He is cute though.